already had a chance? Have you been tasting the first few wines, or are you just gotten in the glass?
Not yet, not yet. Haven't started yet.
Okay, so you're going to start with the Village Chambolle. So maybe we'll ask Christophe to explain what goes into the Village Chambolle. And then as we go through the tasting, if there are, we can work out more about the way of vinifying and all those sorts of things.
Okay. Is this Chambolle 10?
This is Chambolle 10.
Chambolle 10, okay. So that's the village at the Domaine Roumier is a blend between different vineyards, plots of vineyards that are spread around the village, which some of them are Premier Cru. We have a piece of Les Feuilles and a piece of Les Plantes as Premier Crus, which are brought declassified, let's say, into the village. And 2010 is very vibrant type of wine. The wines have bright acidity, fine, very fine tannins, pale colors, but very, very good aromatics. It's, at my sense, it's a very expressful vintage, and which reveals all the what we appreciate into the Chambolle village, because at the domain we combine 2/3 of the acreage of village on the hillside, and 1/3 is on flat lands with a little bit more clay, and it allows us to have year in, year out, a very consistent style in the village at the Domaine Roumier. And 10 is a vintage which I think reveals very well the qualities of the Chambolle village.
Yes, we have come to love 10.
Yeah.
I did one of the very first Zooms I did with 67 Pall Mall. It was before they got round to their trick of being able to send samples out. We just thought we'd look at 9 and 10 as comparable vintages. And I did it from my office upstairs with a bottle of Christophe Chambolle 09 and a bottle of his 10. And the 10 was just so beautiful and so lovely. Whereas the 9, which was more backward, gave less pleasure, but has a lot more density. And for me, is going to be eventually a great vintage. But 10, I mean, you already know, because but how can you not fall in love with 10 every time you have it in the glass?
And I think you mentioned also you had 2010 Clos de la Bussieres. I think I heard that, no? Is this correct?
Yeah.
Yes, that's yours. So let's just have a little idea of the Clos de la Bussieres vintage, vineyard, I should say. Which is your home vineyard. You grew up in the middle of it.
Yes, right. I grew up in the middle of the Clos de la Bussieres vineyard because my parents live in the house which is just positioned in the middle of it. And it's a very unique piece of land because this was designed by monks in the 12th century, never been divided in its entire existence. Remained as a one property all the time. Well, it has changed properties all the time, but it's always been kept in one only ownership. And my grandfather Georges Roumier purchased this vineyard in 1953. And we have still a real clos, you know, in Burgundy. It means a plot of land which is surrounded with a wall. And we have the wall all around it. It's a real clos and Premier Cru and a kind of unique place.
And in fact, the previous owner was the same family who then sold up their domain to allow Jacques Seyss to start Domaine du Jacques. And the Seyss house is sometimes referred to, not by the family, but I've heard other people refer to it as La Petite Bussière, the little Bussière. And those of you who are friends of his, and I know there are several of you, I'm having dinner tonight with Joe Muller, and was supposed to be Sandy as well, but he couldn't make it. And they're staying at the Abbé de la Bussière, which is the origin of the name of the vineyard.
Exactly.
Would have been
Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
So have a good taste of those two. Well, Christophe should really speak. Maybe Christophe's spoken about the vineyards, but my perception when tasting them is that his Chambolle is really the quintessence of the purity of Chambolle. That wonderful elegance, finesse, etc. Maybe the violets, and I don't particularly go into fruit flavors. But more about the texture, because Morey Saint-Denis has just a slightly wilder character, probably greater density being a Premier Cru, but it's something with a bit more grip to it, and it's a food wine more than the Chambolle. The Chambolle is so lovely that you can drink it on its own.
Yes, correct. It's exactly that. We have more clay in the land of the Morey Saint-Denis, and that clay brings in the same vintage, by comparison with the Chambolle Musigny, where we have more stone, the clay brings more depth to the wine, a little bit more tannins also, which is always something good for ageability of the wine.
Any comments from you guys on those two?
The Chambolle is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Couldn't ask for more in a wine. Really loved it.
Good stuff. So the Morey is just a little bit more backward, a little bit less instantly appealing.
That's pretty fair.
Perhaps a little rustic by comparison.
Okay.
Okay. Nice.
So les tanins sauvages de Morey
De
Saint-Denis.
Morey, oui.
It's also darker, right?
Yeah.
Darker. It's kind of is it darker fruits?
It's Morey Saint-Denis always, the Clos de la Bussieres, by the way, always ripens just slightly a little higher sugars than in Chambolle. We have always a little bit more of maybe black fruits, yes, in the Clos de la Bussieres than in Chambolle village. That's something that happens almost every vintage. But I think also the Clos de la Bussieres, because of the clay I explained before, builds up more tannins to the wine, which pay back to the aging in the wine. But Chambolle is always more fragrantful and more precise. It has a better cut and more precision also. Two different profiles of wines, of course. They are really different.
We have this image that appellations change exactly at the boundaries, but of course they don't. And it's particularly true between Chambolle and Morey. And if I were to be asked to draw the map of where the boundary should come between the two villages, I would extend Morey further southwards. And I would take Baude and possibly Sentier Premier Crus. I would take a couple of village vineyards like Drazé, Gamer.
Ah oui, alors ça, yes.
They have much more of a Morey style.
Morey style.
And I would take almost all of Bonnemar as well and give it to Morey Saint-Denis.
I disagree. Bonnemar is Bonnemar.
Bonnemar, okay. That's why it's a Grand Cru, that's why it stands apart. But if you were forced to put it in one village or the other, personally, I would put it in Morey Saint-Denis because it is clearly from a different family to Musigny or Amoureuses.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But still, you're going to have a chance to taste all of those. Yay.
It's good to compare. It's good to compare on the same vintage.
So I think your third wine should be Chambolle Musigny Premier Cru Les Cras. And that we have in our glasses. And 2012 is something of a forgotten vintage because it stops short of the reputation of the really great years. And it's old enough that we don't have it in our immediate memory, and it's young enough that people haven't really started to drink it yet. Or in French restaurants, they drank it 8 years ago. But
yeah, it's all drunk.
But real people haven't started to drink 2012s yet.
So, Jasper. I hope one or two.
So most villages have got a Cras, and they always seem to have the same character, wherever they are. So it's a word that's very similar to the French word for chalk, cray. So you know you're going to get this fresh, rocky aspect to it. I pass the words over to Christophe.
Les Cras the vineyards are laying on very marly soil. These are you could figure this like if this is these soils are very rich with limestone. They contain lots of limestone, but for several reasons the stones never form really itself. The stone remains soft and blended together with the clay local. And these are specific places which we can have in several places. We have some in Les Bonnes-Mares also, the upper part of Bonnes-Mares, which we regularly call Terre Blanche, are marly soils again here. That sort of soil always provides very minerally defined tannins to the wines, lots of precision in taste, and lots of elegancy in the wines, and power together. It's a very specific blend to those sorts of soils, which to my sense carry always a very high signature in the wines. And I've always loved them. I mean, it's if I have to choose in the Bonnes-Mares, because you spoke of that, I think my favorite is not versus Morey Saint-Denis side or Chambolle side, but it would be Terre Blanche or Terre Brune, upper or lower, just because of that difference of type of soils. And the best Bonnes-Mares is in fact a combination of those two. But the Cras is totally on the marly soil. And as Jasper explained, 2012 is somewhere a forgotten vintage here in France, but it's a vintage which we, as Burgundian, we love because it combined some of the definitions of 2010, because the acidity is almost the same as in 10, but we have riper fruit here and a little bit more of alcohol, of course. But we have to accept this alcohol because also we have more complexity and a little more depth in the tannins of the 2012s.
Yeah,
it's a vintage which I really enjoy a lot.
Actually, me too. In both colours, it just sort of, it's not that it doesn't have a good reputation. It just doesn't really have. It's not something that people speak about, but. Very happy to be sharing this with Christophe.
I'm happy to share it with you all also.
Christophe, perhaps a word on, okay, so in the old days, you know, we never even asked the question. We just tasted the wines and decided whether we liked the wines or not. But more recently, everybody wants to know a lot more technical information, and people care about whether it's made with stems or not with stems. Still, it's more important to us to like the wine or not.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, you have always used some stems and you've maybe increased a bit.
Yeah, I've increased a bit since the vintages are more sunny and more warm and drier. I've increased the amount of whole bunch in the winemaking. 2012 was not that kind. It was not a vintage extremely hot. And by the way, it was not hot. It's been hot at the end of the season for the growing, for the vines, but it's not been a really hot or dry vintage. And here we have something like 45% whole bunch and 55% of the fruit were the stem. That's about that, which is a combination. It's a common combination for me, except in warmer years, such as 15, or 16, 17, and so on, in fact, where I use sometimes 65, 75% of whole bunch and the stem a little less.
But the point is not to have a flavor of whole bunch, is it?
I know, well, I love that too.
Yes, yes.
But it's a nice consequence. It's also to bring some more freshness in taste in the wine to compensate the very sunny years sometimes make very flabby sorts of wines, and I like the nerve and the vibrance, the vibrancy that the stems can bring.
It just disappeared from the picture when I open up the next bottle.
You are fully excused.
Yes, you have 6 wines in front of you. Okay, so we're going to move on to the Ruchottes Chambertin.
Well, that's the next. Okay.
Yeah, 16, and then we have the Amoureuses 17, and then we have the Bonnes-Mares. We want to, yeah.
Sure.
So Ruchottes Chambertin, and you got this vineyard, I think, in 1977.
Exact.
At the same time that Morey got theirs. Rousseau had, I think, had a plot before, and then they got more in that year when a big owner sold up a substantial amount. And the story goes that Charles Rousseau was sort of buying it all, and then his wife told him he wasn't allowed to, and he had to find friends who could take some. Is that how you hear it in the family?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's the way we remember it. And Charles Rousseau has approached his two friends, winemakers, Georges Musigny and my father, Jean-Marie Roumier, and offered them to share the purchase of the entire property of Thomas Bassot that was for sale. And that's how it happened. And in fact, my father could not make it this year, and we had Monsieur Bonnefond, who was just an industrial person who purchased it, and we farmed the vineyard for him.
Mm. And in fact, by chance, our next Zoom tasting meeting is going to be with the ladies of Morey, and we will hear. They've got a particular story about the Ruchottes Chambertin, but I'll hold it back for them. I will thank Christophe at one point when he realized that Monsieur Bonnefond had been building up some stocks of old vintages, and he persuaded Monsieur Bonnefond it was time to sell them. And I got some, and our excellent friend from Norway got some. So
yes.
We were looked after. Thank you, Christophe, for that.
Welcome.
So
Jasper, we might be,
2016.
Jasper, your friends in Hong Kong would also like a.
we might be coming to visit you.
Yeah, you've got to go back 20 years ago. It wasn't me personally. It was my company who got it. And guess what? We had people who wanted to buy it from us. So that's before I knew any of you, apart from maybe Richard. But we're going back a while. Oh wow! What a bouquet in that glass.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So 2016, the vintage in which it was my first year working with the Hospice de Beaune, and it was nearly a disaster, partly because so much of the vineyard was damaged by the frost at the beginning of the year, and partly because the message of frost damage blighted everything, and everybody assumed that the wines couldn't be good.
Yeah.
And I'm not a big fan of the whites, but I do like the reds, and there is such a drive of energy and a crunchy acidity in these wines.
Yeah.
I really love them.
They have depth and flavors. They have some power. The production was extremely tiny here. It's 11 hectoliter per hectare. It's it was frozen, and I like it. I like very much.
Yeah.
It was a sunny vintage also. We had lots of sun in the summer. The fruit were perfect. I mean, those, because you have to imagine that when the frost came, this was the 27th of April, and all the shoots were burnt by we call burnt because it's the effect the visible effect that it provides after frost. All the buds were frozen, so it means that all the potential crop has disappeared in the same time, and secondary buds are starting instead. So secondary shoots. I don't know how to explain this in English purely, but and those buds, those shoots do not carry much of fruit. Only very tiny grapes bunch. The branch contain a few berries of fruit. In fact, very little. It means that the production is reduced by this little grapes.
Mm.
And as the season came, which came after, was very good, all the ripeness came a very perfect way.
Yes, I remember I had to follow it very closely because, as I said, it was my very first year of doing Hospice de Beaune stuff, and I was very nervous about what was needed. And even maybe 2 weeks out, it looked as though it was going to be a very uneven vintage because the ripening, when the grapes changed color, it was very, very variable in 2016. And then suddenly, just at last, it all caught up. Yeah. And you don't have a feeling in the reds, at any rate, of sort of multiple variations of ripeness.
Yes, the difference was because some buds that were not frozen were carrying some fruit which were a little bit more ahead in the ripeness than those from the secondary buds. And so there was a difference of ripeness between those two. Yeah.
There's some activity going on at the table that makes me think that some people are trying to corner any last bottles in the marketplace. Wouldn't be stupid. As it happens, Ruchottes Chambertin is probably also the favorite vineyard of young Cyrielle Rousseau. It's the one that she goes nuts for. Yeah. I adore it. And normally it has so much detail. It's, you could say in relation to the great Grand Crus of Vin Romanée, you have Echezeaux, which is all about the detail and less about the massive weight. And it's a little bit the same for me in the Chambertin family. The Ruchottes it's like a little lattice work, and those really old English sort of Cotswold stone buildings. You have small windows with a little lattice framework across them. It's just, that's the sort of detail that I think of with Ruchotte. But you've got energy in the 16.
Always,
sure.
yeah, yeah.
I was just saying it seems a lot more approachable than the Cras 12. I mean, it's much easier to drink, much more kind of beguiling than the Cras 12 right now.
I would say that the Cras was a little bit between two stools. It's lost its initial attractiveness, if you like, and it hasn't yet developed into a mature wine, whereas this is still on its first fruit and hasn't gone into a shell at all. But I wouldn't disagree with you at all in that tasting appreciation.
Mm-hmm. There is more richness in the Ruchotte. That's the vintage also.
Well, we'll meet again another 15 years and share some more bottles of Ruchotte.
Yeah.
16. Yum yum.
And Christophe, have you ever tried? I mean, given the original purchase was Rousseau was there before and then participated in the expansion. Morey and yourself, have you ever put your wines side by side and tasted together?
Yeah, and we did that several times. And
you didn't ask me.
You didn't come for the first time. This was at the Morey cellar. This was interesting. And once we did that also for the Rouge et le Blanc, you know, the paper. Yes, and we did that also with Jean-Louis, Subtil, and several people. We did that several times, yes, just because the question was, because the three of us, we share the same, the vineyard is the same origin for the three of us, same origin as vineyard location, but as well as ownership before. And it's interesting to think that the same kind of vines that have been looked after the same way, but that are changing ownership and management could also keep the impressions from the time before us. And so we wanted to check that over several vintages, and also to see if Ruchottes Chambertin, which is made in Gevrey Chambertin, differs from a Ruchotte that is made in Chambolle Musigny or Ruchottes Chambertin that is made in Vin Romanée. Does this kind of situation influence the style of the wine? The question is big because we didn't bring any answer. In fact, we found differences, but more differences that are more in relationship with the style, the house style, the individual style of the makers. In fact,
but more when the wines were young, isn't that right?
Yes.
After they got 10 years and more old,
they turn more like their own way to show. Yeah. Yes, this is right. Yes, this was an interesting kind of comparison to do. The chance for Ruchotte is that. I think I can speak for the others also, is that it's a great vineyard, but which is kept in hands, in good hands. I mean, the three of us are equal, or modestly, I can say equal in style, the three of us. And it's good. It's a good chance for this vineyard also.
I mean, if I were tasting this blind, I wouldn't necessarily know it had been made with a lot of whole clusters. I don't find that, especially with Christophe's wines. It's about the wine itself, and it's about the terroirs. And sure, it has some. Probably adds to the complexity a certain amount, but you don't immediately smell it and think, oh, right, okay, you've got little crushed strawberries. Weirdly, I occasionally do guess whole bunches when I'm given a Rousseau wine blind. Oh, yeah? There's such an elegance and finesse about the nose. A floral character that makes me think of whole bunches. Yeah. And Morey clearly not.
No, right. They understand. Yeah.
I just keep on smelling this. I love that very sort of fresh spice that you get on the nose too.
But I think there's a part of whole cluster here.
Yeah, sure.
On the nose, I mean. Huh? It doesn't have yet the dry rose petals definition in flavors, but it has some hint, some kind of which I like.
Okay, well, next up on your list, and we have as well, is 2017 Amoureuses. Tu as un deuxième verre si tu veux pas jeter Ruchottes.
Oh, bah, je le connais. Hein. Je le connais. Hein.
For me, the Ruchottes already given me wonderful sensation. But it is true that 2017 is a vintage that just sings out of the glass. For one, no, actually. For once, I don't mind infanticide when it's 2017.
Yeah, 17 has a drinkability. Which,
So, Christophe, Amoureuses, does the name come from the clay soil which then sticks to your boots, or is there another explanation?
I don't believe this.
You don't believe that, no?
Well, anyway, the clay sticks to your boots any place.
Yeah.
And when it's wet. No.
It's a theoretical explanation for why Amoureuses is called Amoureuses, because it does have quite a lot of clay in the soil.
Oh.
And when it's wet, it does stick to the boots. But Christophe is not a believer in that explanation.
No, I've heard another explanation, which is more complex to translate, I believe. En fait, c'est parce que, sorry, I say this in French because I cannot speak that English.
I'll translate if I can.
En fait, c'est des endroits où, tu sais, il y a des éboulis, parce qu'il y a des failles. Donc, en bord de vigne, tu as des éboulis, etc., dans lesquels tu peux rien cultiver. Il y a des arbres, des arbustes, etc., et beaucoup de ronces qui poussent. Et les ronces, on les appelle les mûres, quelquefois.
Oui,
tu sais, c'est le fruit, la mûre.
Et
Amoureuses, voilà, viendraient les endroits où il y a des mûres autour.
Okay. All right, I understand these difficulties, but we'll try and get there. But in this particular section of the slope, there are lots of small faults. And included in the faults, you get lots of rocks of scree, effectively, which is tumbled down from above. And it provides places where you can't really plant vines or indeed cultivate anything. So you get bushes growing up, and you get brambles as well. And brambles give blackberries, and the French word for blackberry is amure, and maybe amure, amoureuse, like that. Just sort of play on words. Anyway, that's an alternative theory. And you heard it here first, because I haven't heard it before.
And for me, originally, it's probably also the style of the wine that has influenced this name, because Amoureuse means being in love, but in the feminine way. And this wine is always a very lovely kind of person. It's very charming, extremely silky and sensual. So it's probably someone has one time said, my wife is in love with this wine, ma femme est amoureuse de ce vin, et peut-être.
Okay.
Who knows?
Yes.
We don't really know.
Possible as well. I have a similar theory with Les Charmes, because different people have different ideas. People say it's maybe because the Charmy is, I'm trying to remember the name of the tree, but there's a particular tree, it's not beech, but it's of that family. And I can't believe in every village there was a place where those trees grew, and nor do I think it's from chaume, which means a sort of a field, a prairie almost. But every time you have a vineyard called Charme, you have a style which is charming. So I think I have a suspicion that might come into it somewhere or other. Hornbeam was the word I was looking for of the tree.
Ah, le charme, c'est hum.
Charmy, c'est hornbeam.
Hum.
Hornbeam. Ouais. Bon.
Jasper, these are very good stories if you were to write a book about Burgundy.
One of these days, I'm going to get around to it. I've just been practicing so far.
That was
It
excellent.
cost me a divorce, though, if I go and shut myself up in my room for hours on end. So how are you doing with the Amoureuses? I mean, it does just have that perfume on the nose. That's so sensual. Charming.
Unfortunately, my glass is already finished.
But if you can nip over here quickly, we can help. We still have full glasses and the rest of the bottle.
And the rest of the bottle.
And the rest of the bottle too.
J'aime bien la petite touche d'orange, l'écorce d'orange un tout petit peu qu'on a là-dedans. Enfin, moi, je trouve que c'est... Puis le soyeux du tanin. Hein.
Yeah. There's a little touch of orange peel, which he likes, and then the silkiness of the tannins. To translate, Christophe is just as enthusiastic as you are, I can tell.
Si, moi, j'adore.
Well, how could you not?
J'adore ça. C'est...
The question, Jasper, in Amoureuses, the vineyard, is there a difference depending where you are in the vineyard? Is it a bit like, you know, we've discussed Clos Saint-Jacques before, you know, the producers.
Clos Saint-Jacques isn't really, but Amoureuses, yes.
The producers are top to bottom, but is there a difference? Because I guess producers are not all uniform, right? In their locations. In the plot.
Yeah, it's right. Again, we turn back to the fault story and the topography, the local topography, where we have, because of the faults, we have differences of levels and slope also. The slope is always full east anyway, but there are the vineyards that are at the top are just there's just a small street that separates Amoureuses from Musigny. So you can imagine that it's almost like Musigny continuity going on beyond. In fact, there's a fault, but it doesn't create that difference. But the second fault, there is a second fault, and then the third one, where then there's a drop. The slope is steeper, and it's a different kind of soil because it's steeper. Probably on the edge of the fault, some stones have turned over, and it's a different kind of soil. Anyway, c'est un sol qui est devenu beaucoup plus gélif. Et en fait, c'est Françoise qui nous a expliqué ça à partir de la troisième faille qui est t'as une faille qui est sur la petite route qui sépare les Amoureuses des Musigny. Et une deuxième au milieu qu'on voit très bien chez Fred Munier encore, mais et une troisième plus bas, elle est au milieu de celle de Fred, et un peu plus bas, et après, oui, tu as ça. Après, tu arrives chez Groffier. Mais là, la pente est différente, et entre les deux, il y a eu comme des basculements de roches, de cailloux qui ont gelé, parce qu'ils étaient exposés à la surface. Et donc, ça te fait un sol plus... En fait, il est plus filtrant parce qu'il est... mais les roches sont beaucoup plus petites. Si tu veux, ça réduit la dimension des cailloux. C'est différent en termes d'exposition.
Okay, so you've actually got three fault lines within Amoureuses. So you've got the one which is on the little road that leads up and doesn't make much of a difference. You have another one which is actually halfway through Fred Munier's parcel, and you go plot. You can see it.
It's still visible.
So I should go and have a look next time. And then you have what's very clearly another bigger fault which drops down. In fact, part of the Groffier holding is in fact, I think all below after the third fault, I think it's only Groffier.
No, there's Groffier and Drouin.
And
Drouin is on both sides, but Groffier also.
Yeah.
But Groffier is the bigger.
Yeah. And here it's made up, there's been a lot of rock which in years gone by, I mean, millions of years gone by, has frozen and split up. And it gives you a more well-drained soil, a little bit less like the sort of clay-rich, less freely draining soil above. And I did talk to Nicolas Groffier about his various parts and said, why don't you make them apart? And he said, no, we'd never do that. But another journalist has actually tasted them having been made apart. So he has at least, not necessarily commercially, but experimentally,
yes.
He has made them apart. But it is quite mixed. And we actually have a new player at a very small scale, because Domaine Bretagne owned the sort of the rock face that drops down into the Vougeot vineyards, and they have done a little bit of landscaping. And it's like any of you familiar with the vineyards of the Douro, pork country, they have what they call patamares, which is where you have just one or two rows of vines that sort of go up like that and follow the contours. And so they've made themselves enough for half a barrel or a barrel of Amoureuses. Yeah, so yeah, there you go.
Nice. They made a really great job there. They made a great job.
And actually, something which not mentioned in Christophe's description, and in fact, I never think of it or feel it myself, but there is a bit of Amoureuses which pops up above the road on the same contour and adjacent to Musigny, but without necessarily being full Musigny quality, but different. Who knows? Who has that? Remind me.
Meunier. Il y a Meunier, il y a Berthaud qui en a un bout. Et puis.
We'll study it afterwards.
Oui. En fait, le gros propriétaire, c'est Meunier et Berthaud, les deux.
So Meunier and François Berthaud, not Amélie. Right? Different spelling. Yeah. Well, we're taking some time over this so we can go on savoring the wine. But frankly, this will keep, no problem. But I think you can see everything that you need to see in this wine at 5 years old. But I think 2017 is going to do it at 2000 and just never lie down. It doesn't mean that it will build massively more, but it's always going to be, yeah, you could drink this or keep it for a couple more years. And I think it's just going to stay there.
Yeah.
Slightly bigger yield than 17.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's the type of yield that you would like to see every year, because no, it has. I mean, as a consequence, 16 was all frozen, and the vines that were touched by the frost in 16, compensated the next in 17, and the yield was good in 17. In fact, yes, it doesn't mean a lot. I mean, it's something like 36 hectoliter per hectare here, and it's okay. It's really. It's the kind of yield I would like to have every year almost.
So 36, I think legally you'd be allowed, what, 48?
40, no,
somewhere in the 40s.
42, okay. Yeah.
So we're still well short of the permitted amount. And you've got the good old boys who are always pushing to make more than the permitted amount on the grounds that some years they will get less anyway because of a climatic accident. I remember Jeremy says he would leave sort of 6 to 8 bunches on his vines, and the next door neighbor had got sort of 12 to 14 bunches on his. And Jeremy was looking at them like that, and the guy came by and he looked at Jeremy's vines and said, "You young guys, you've learned nothing." Jeremy said, "What?" And he said, "Look, your vines, along comes some hail, and 6 bunches get damaged on the vines, you've got none left. If 6 bunches get damaged on my vines, I've still got another 10 bunches behind." So, okay, it's a theory, but
if doesn't happen,
it's a theory. But oddly enough, even if I named the producer, he's not somebody you would have heard of, and with good reason. He's not going to appear on one of our Zooms. Right. I think next up and last in this series that you have on the table is the Bonnemar 14. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry.
I disappeared. Ah ouais, j'aime beaucoup les 17.
Yeah. Aussi. Correct.
Ah bah oui, mais moins maintenant, parce qu'à partir de 2015, on utilise des bouchons NDTech, mais avant, bah, il y a toujours ce risque quand même. Enfin bon, avec le NDTech, il y a d'autres problèmes peut-être, mais il n'y a pas...
So Christophe is just saying that from 2015 onwards, he used the type of cork which is called NDTech, where the cork suppliers guarantee that there is no cork problem.
Yeah, because each individual cork has been checked by gas chromatography. I don't know how you call that.
Yeah, no, that's
anyway,
right.
But each individual cork has been checked. Doesn't mean it's a treatment. It's just a check.
And it's not absolutely foolproof. And it's not quite clear in the small print to what level they are guaranteeing it. Are they guaranteeing you the market price back on a spoiled bottle?
Yeah.
I don't think so. Maybe
they pretend yes, but I would like to check this guarantee one day.
Anyway, so from 2015, Endotech, and this is 2014, but our bottle is pure and lovely.
Oh yeah, lovely.
So this is a fascinating vintage. I find 2014, as we know, a great vintage for white Burgundy. Not so well reviewed for reds. And I think there's a difference between the Côte de Nuit and the Côte de Beaune as well. It's one of those years where the wines which work, I think, are very good, but across the piece, you will also have others that don't work. And I'll ask Christophe if he's in agreement. It was the year in which we had the visitor from Japan, the fruit fly, the Drosophila Suzuki, which theoretically, and in fact I bumped into you while you were picking the Clos de la Bussieres in 2014. I'd just been tasting with Dujac or maybe having lunch with them, and I was walking down the road to where I parked my car, and I could hear them picking over the wall, and I put my head over the wall, and there was Christophe with his team.
Yeah.
This fruit fly has the unusual habit that it has a very sharp nose and it can puncture healthy fruit and then enjoy it, whereas most fruit flies will only go to already damaged fruit. Whether this is completely true, and there are people have different theories, but there was a risk in 2014, and probably more in the Côte d'Ivoire, particularly close to habitations, to buildings, where people had other forms of fruit in their gardens, that it developed. And there was sort of a little bit of a wave of encroaching rot, and you could smell, where it had punctured fruit, you could smell acid, VA, volatile acidity, actually even in the vineyards, the bunches of grapes. So some people, therefore, in 2014 in the Côte d'Ivoire, I think, picked too early in order to escape this happening. But when I smell that wine, it's pure, it's clean, and there's no feeling of underripeness.
No, but yes, right. Well, thank you first, but you are right. It was very local. In fact, we did not have an invasion of those fruit flies. It was very local. In places where you had houses or orchards, I mean, with apple trees or fruit trees, and places where you would have sometimes bushes, these are places where sometimes you have wild fruits, and those fruit flies were keeping waiting for the grapes to ripen before they jump to the grapes. And I have an example because I've had some fruit flies, Suzuki, in two places, in fact, in the Clos de la Bussieres in 14, but they're very local. I mean,
up against the wall with the house.
Yes.
Yes.
And because some birds are staying there, and sometimes they would pick some berries or fruit, and if they don't pick properly, then they just damage the fruit, which attracts the fruit flies then. And also another place in Les Cras, because my neighbor there, one of my neighbor, which I would never mention his name, had made some green harvest, but not green. This was pink harvest. I mean, it was just before harvest.
Too late, yeah.
And they left the grapes. No. They left the grape on the ground. And every of us who was around was invaded, but it was very local. And as Jasper mentioned, those fruit flies provocate a bacterial invasion. Then after they have they came to your berries. And this develops quickly some volatile acidity, which is very easy to identify by the smell. And on the sorting table, we will remove this very easily, in fact. And no, it's not been an invasion. We didn't have this all over the place. But now, every year, we have a survey of those fruit flies just to check before harvest if there is a risk to be exposed to them. In any case, if we would check that we have the risk, we don't have the solution for it. We don't have it.
Never mind. They're all having dinner. Can I offer you a walnut from the garden?
Of course, yes. Yeah. Is this compatible with wine?
It is very wine compatible.
Okay.
One man needs food, I thought. We have the basket in front of us.
I like 14. It's light and easy and very friendly sort of vintage. Where because the wines have balance and because the fruit, after sorting out, are perfectly clear and clean, the wines, I'm sure, will age. And because they have balance. They will not age because they have power, They don't carry that sort of power, but they have balance, and this will help them to age well.
Christophe, you said it's not powerful to 2014, but it does enough depth of fruit that it will reveal itself, say, in 10 years' time, because that's how, at least on the nose, it's pretty reserved, but it's nicely balanced, like you said, but the fruit's there at the end.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah.
There's more fruit concentration in 14 than in 17. So it's going to take a little bit longer to come around. What the structure is of a vintage which is more approachable young, but the fruit concentration is actually pretty good, I find, in this.
I always.
Did you pick up a little taste of walnut in the wine?
No. I've always built up my mind that any wine can age, even it's a very light version, if it's a light style, as long as it has balance. I mean, this balance always creates a point of weakness in a wine. You know, wines that are extremely tannic do not age the proper way. I mean, they remain always extremely tannic, and they will never develop the grace and the complexity that you could expect over the time. And also, I think the extremely acidic wines do not turn better any kind. I mean, I think the balance in wine between the acids and the richness and the tannins, this is something that makes the wine to age. And even in a very light-bodied vintages, Jasper, you know this vintage like 82 or they do very well, and 94, even if it's well made, those sorts of vintage never collapse. They do not bring a new wine over time, but they age well.
And as it happens, earlier today, I drank a Clos de la Roche. I tasted a Clos de la Roche from Christophe's birthday, which is not a famous vintage at all, and it had held up really well.
Ah oui?
Yeah, ah oui, tout à fait.
Il avait mis en bouteille, lui, à cette époque-là?
Si.
Ah ouais. Ah ouais. Ah ouais.
So you're now going to have to go away and look up Christophe's birthday. There you go. It's not far different from mine.
No? 2 years difference?
One, I think.
One, okay.
Actually, Jasper, I agree with Christophe's comments. So we tried a 94 Roumier Bonnemar Magnum, I think just as COVID was starting. And we thought it was an absolutely fantastic bottle. We did not expect the 94 to show.
You know, it was nearly a lovely vintage. It's just that Jancis was filming in France during the harvest of 94. And she did the whole series on grape varieties. And every one of them, it starts in Chile, where it hasn't rained since 1868. It finishes in Australia, where it doesn't rain very often. And in between, whether it was Bordeaux, Burgundy, any other part, the rain just came pouring down in absolute sheets. But the grapes had looked really, really good up to that point.
Until end of August, we were expecting a fabulous vintage, and we had 2 weeks of rains in September. And it has ruined the power and the potential of the vintage. But still, there are some good elements. And if you come across one day Amoureuses or Musigny 94, these are fabulous wines. Those two, I like the Bonnemar, but I think the Amoureuses and Musigny are just sometimes.
Wow. Okay. Understood.
Kept going on his phone
I like the vintage like this, which everybody has forgotten or neglected by reputation, where some really good surprise comes surge.
Absolutely. Yeah. Including I'm about to give it away, including 1958. That's right.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
There's an extraordinary harmony about this wine. Sure, it's going to get better later on, but it doesn't have the elements of structure, tannins, or too high acidity that mean that you won't get pleasure young. But there is a harmony about it. At the same time, over and above the Chambolle Musigny fruit that you've got in there, you've also got something with a little bit more muscle, a little bit more grip, which speaks of Bonnemar. And if you took it further, so I'm going to say that Bonnemar is 2/3 Morey Saint-Denis to 1/3 Chambolle. How about that?
Oh, really? That's strange. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
sure, it makes a difference between the
Yep.
the red soil and the white soil. And Christophe is lucky enough that across the piece, it's roughly half and half.
Yeah, in these years,
At
yes,
this
this was
bit, yeah.
50-50. Yeah.
Yeah.
But probably the brown soil has a great power to the body of the wine, and so that's why maybe you suggest it is 2/3 of it.
Yeah,
because it impacts more the body.
It's true also that almost everybody has both soils.
Yeah.
You would need to have a plot that's only down in the bottom right on the map to be all red soil or brown soil, and only in the top left if you were to be all white soil. There are a couple of plots like that, but mostly with the producers who then have other plots elsewhere to compensate. And normally people have plots that begin at the bottom and go up to the top. So yeah, so it's not really an issue.
And is it correct, Christophe, your plot is now evenly balanced between white and red soil? Or was it for a while that it was a bit more one versus the other?
You mean
now you have more? Now it's changed. It was 50-50.
It was 50-50 until 2015. And it has changed, you are right, after starting with 2016, because we have gained some white soil part. And so now it's about 65% white and 35% brown instead, which I'm very, very happy of, because I've always preferred, if I had to choose one wine on those two, I've always preferred the white soil. Maybe we disagree on that. I don't. No, I'm not sure.
No, we don't. But what is true is that when we came to your domain with Michael and a few other friends around the table, it was obvious to everybody which was white soil and which was brown soil. Michael, did you have a preference at the time? I mean, they were just so different, and they were both such adorable wines in their own right.
Jasper, I finished my glasses of those 1990 within minutes. It was fantastic.
Some would say slightly earlier than that, but
but I did.
Also, but since it was your special time, you recharged your glasses. But,
yes, I did. But I did have a.
It was a truly. I think for all of us there, maybe not Christophe, but all of us there, it was a really, really special moment. Certainly,
it was.
And not easily repeatable, but thank you, Christophe, for doing it.
Well,
no, thank you.
You never know.
You never know. One day. Who knows?
One day, yes.
Now, that's your first flight of wines, and the ones that we've joined you for in tasting. I'm just going to tell Christophe what you have got to come. And then if there's any particular comment, something he says, for that wine, look out for this. So you've got mostly the vineyards that we have already tasted, but you've got Les Cras 2005,
wow.
Amoureuses 10.
Ça va être bon.
That's all right. Sébastien, faut pas tout servir à Michael non plus. Donc il faut que ça soit partagé également. Bonnemar 2007.
Ça, c'est très bon aussi.
And there we should speak about that because it is a light vintage in Burgundy, very charming, very nice, but not special, except maybe chez Roumier, where I don't know. Do you know why your wines are so good in 07? You do know that you may, you do that. Come on, we've talked about it. You know that, you know, you absolutely, you know, certain vignerons in a particular year, you can say that was 92 was the vintage for Philippe Angel.
Ah oui.
And 2007 is the vintage for Christophe. Not the only one, but
I think 92 was a very good for several producers in Vaune Romanée anyway, but Philippe et Henri, les deux. Mais parce qu'Henri, il a fait des 92 extraordinaires aussi. Henri Jailly.
Ah, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Mais for 2007, I don't know. I think we have sorted out a lot because it's a vintage where we are gained by botrytis over the summertime, and there was a lot to sort out. And probably this is where we have gained some quality. I have no idea. I think I was also a little later than most of the producers around to harvest. And sometimes at this point, it creates a few days create a huge difference. I have to admit, I don't remember totally what has been provoking those sorts of difference. But because Bonnemar is a very good wine on that vintage, but all the range of wines of the Domaine are at the same potential. I mean, they offer all the same profile. We have made a real success with the 2007s all over.
You have, and in fact, I've been the only one of yours which I've been drinking in my cellar. The rest I keep. Is the Bourgogne Rouge 07, and you still think I could keep that another 5 or 10 years easily, even before starting it. So I've stopped drinking that wine because I think it's still too young. And then after that, we moved to what I suggested is they have 2 wines in the 80s, and then we come back to 2 wines in the 90s. So the Clos Vougeot 89, and the Ruchottes Chambertin 83.
Wow!
So what would you expect from those 2?
Great things. I think Clos Vougeot 89, you have to confirm this, but I love the 89s all over. The wines have made a real good aging over time. Clos Vougeot in 89 was only we had, in fact, originally in the Domaine, we had 2 parcels, 2 plots in the Clos Vougeot. One was close to the Grand Maupertuis, and the other part was lower. I don't know the name, by the way, but it's
the names get increasingly not very pleasing as you go down.
and so 89 was made with the lower part of the vineyard because we had, for family ownerships reasons, we had to organize. That's why I don't have the Clos Vougeot anymore, because it's now my cousin Laurent who is in charge with it. And but the last vintage was 96. And so the only remaining parcel in 89 was the lower part, and it has made a real good job in 89. So I'm sure you will have pleasure with it. And the Ruchottes 83, we made a very nice 83 at the Domaine also, because we were I was very pushy with the sorting of the fruit, and it was something that has created a big difference in this vintage. In this vintage, you have to know that we have had a hailstorm all over the Côte de Nuit, the 22nd of July. And at this time, the fruit was just formed already, but then it has created some mold development around the berries that were damaged by the hail. By chance, August remained very dry, so all those berries, most of them, let's say, fell, and because they dried out, they were damaged and they dried out because of the draft of the August month. And then we had, just at the last time of August, we had some rains, a little bit of rain, but enough to reactivate the mold of the remaining berries that were damaged. And this was on dit un foyer, c'est quoi? A center of development to botrytis, again in September. But we have, with my father at this time, it was just an argument between him and them and me, because he didn't want to spoil, to throw some fruit. And we found a way to make some very good sorting out, and we've made very good 83s. And all over, it's a really great vintage. It's a very good vintage.
I think it's important that you touched on something there. At that period, hardly anybody did any sorting.
Yeah.
The idea was that you have the grapes of the year, and that's all there is to it.
You deal with that.
And people tell me stories about how, as they were taking the grapes back to the winery from the vineyard, there was this cloud of dust coming out, which is in fact spores of rot, just sort of coming out off the grapes. So if you didn't do any sorting, you made really ugly wines. What is totally weird is that some of those wines, which definitely had a taste of rot when they were young, And I could cite Domaine La Romney Conti, and I could cite Domaine Rousseau, and I could cite the ones which I was buying, Domaine Denis Bachelet. You didn't particularly pick it up when the wines were in barrel, at least I didn't. Maybe I was too young and inexperienced. But shortly afterwards in bottle, you did. And so lots of them got refused by the customers, or they bought them and they then sent them back. And now, from any of those three domains I've just mentioned, let alone Christophe's where he'd sorted in the first place, the fruit, the good fruit, has just come up and has smothered the rot. And the wines are exciting to drink. But if you could have avoided that rot, as you did, and you were clearly ahead of the game then, it's true, isn't it? That many people with sorting tables. And
it's a vintage where we have a slight, you will see, it's beautiful anyway, because it's probably not in the Ruchottes that it's the most apparent, but we have developed some kind of over-ripeness flavors. And the wines are delicious because they have that sort of honey kind and very, very, very nice, beautiful. I really like 83s.
Yeah, well, I'm jealous that we aren't there with you to. Well, you're just going to have to finish the bottles of the ones that we have got. And then originally you were going to have 2018 Musigny at the start, but I suggested to Michael that you really need to find something with some maturity for Musigny. So you've got 98 Musigny and 99 Bon Mar.
That's interesting too. Yeah. A 98 is a forgotten vintage somewhere, but I love the vintage. It's slightly rustical, but very deep, serious old style wines, which I really care a lot.
Yeah, the vintage that got trashed by Mr. Parker's publication. But I worked a little bit. I didn't work the harvest, but I called in on and spent some time on the sorting table with Philippe Angel in '98. And so much had to be chucked out to make good wine. But if you did, then the wines they've got real character. It's not perfection, but they're wines of interest and style and character. Then '99, it was hard to do anything wrong.
Yes, as you mentioned, 99 is just perfection, and it's still youngish, very youngish still, but everything is in there. It's one of our best vintage of the three past decades. It's one of the best vintages. No problem. You choose well, in fact.
We've been diligently collecting over the years. Christophe, can you make one more comment, please, on your 95s? It's another we very much enjoy.
What could I say? It's again the sort of year where it's been a very difficult year because the fruit set was very bad. We had a lot of mirandage on that vintage because of rains at the time of blooming. Fruit set was very bad, so we knew from the beginning that it would be a very short, very small crop. And then it has kept like wet and cold weather all over the season. Most of people said, oh, okay, there is no reason to wait for harvest. And most of people have harvested quickly because it has been raining a little bit in the 2 first weeks of September. And I said, is this really ripe? Of course, if you measure the sugars were here, but the tannins were still a bit green in taste. So I said, no, I don't harvest now. And so when everybody had stopped harvest, I started. In fact, I think I made like, like sort of last minute decision to push back. And this has created a difference.
As you did in 2021 as well.
And 21 and 15 and several vintages where you don't have the right feeling. But in fact, in 95, it's obvious that it turned like a very good decision, which is based on nothing measurable. It's just the chance, I think, the luck somewhere that has operated. And in fact, I don't regret what I've decided, of course, because it's turned like a very good point. And 95 is a very, 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 very vibrant moment of emotion in the wine. I love it. I love the vintage at all. If I had to choose on all the wines I have made so far, which would be my favorite, I very often mention 95.
Yes, and I agree. Look, we've gone slightly over time, but we've been really, really, really happy to do it with these magnificent wines. Are there any questions that you'd like to ask either about the wines ahead or something else from Christophe?
No, so we always have one question. Now, Christophe, if you could buy any vineyard that you could choose, which would it be?
Oh, it's a difficult answer. It would be Côte de Nuit. So Clos Saint-Denis. It's often my answer. And you may know why. You probably know already why. Just because I've always loved the Dujac, Jacques Cess wines, and for me, Clos Saint-Jacques at Dujac, it's only Clos Saint-Denis at Dujac. It's total emotion, and this is a vineyard that I would love to one day. One day. But I mean, I'm happy with what I have got already.
So one other vineyard that you don't own at all in Chambolle Musigny?
Oui, les Baudes, c'est pas mal, mais c'est trop ressemblant au Baude-Mar.
Ouais.
And les Groseilles.
Ah, okay.
More modest, but
the Groseilles, that would be interesting because it's not very well known. It's a small vineyard. It's all a little bit parceled up between different people. That wasn't the answer I was expecting. It was a good one, interesting one. Okay, guys.
First lot.
And first lot, yes.
Thank you very much.
Anything else? Otherwise, let's just say big thank you to Christophe.
Thank you, Jasper. Thank you to all of you.
Yeah.
And thank you for your patience and really the dedication you have around wines. I can see this. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll say goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.